Welcome back to the history of computing. We're going to continue our conversation where we left off, World War II. We're going to talk about the Colossus, which was actually a group of 10 computing machines created by the British during the war. Colossus was instrumental in allowing the Allies to crack the German U-boat Enigma code that was used by the Enigma machines that were used to encode German military intelligence during the war. If you haven't seen the movie Imitation Game, it has a fascinating story about how the British broke that Enigma code. I don't know how accurate it is or not, but it is a fascinating story. The Germans during the war were also creating a computing machine called the Z1. And it was the first freely programmable computer in the world which used Boolean logic and binary floating point numbers. It was destroyed in the war during the bombardment of Berlin. But there is a replica of the Z1 in the German Museum of Technology in Berlin today. And this is the replica of that. Let's move into the first generation of computers. They were built on vacuum tubes. At this time, we see that the hardware and the software in these computing devices are beginning to develop separately. On the hardware side, these vacuum tubes are working as memory. Data is written to magnetic drums and paper tapes, and the punch cards are handling the inputs. Line printers and secondary storage are also appearing on the scene. On the software side of things, programmers will begin to specialize as system engineers, those who program for systems, and application engineers, and those who program applications that run on the systems. Assembly language is taking the place of machine language and binary language in order to make programming a lot easier. If you don't have to code in machine language, anything is easier. By 1951, we introduce a UNIVAC. It is the first commercially viable computer that's made famous when it accurately predicted the winner of the 1952 presidential election. They actually sold 19 UNIVAC computers from 51 to 54. The creator of the Mark I felt that there was probably only need in the country for about 5 or 6 UNIVACs. I think maybe he was a sore loser. In all total, there were 44 that were sold, and it could store 12,000 characters. 1955 saw the advent of IBM's Big Blue. Remember Herman Hollerith and that census tabulating machine that he created? Well, by 1955, his company, IBM, is dominating the mainframe market. They have 70% of the market share. And they manufactured these computational equipment for office use. The mainframe machines were very large. And it's called the Big Blue because of this color, the signature color of the suits that were worn by the sales force. By the late 1950s, we are seeing the second generation of computers with transistors. Transistors are beginning to take the place of vacuum tubes. They are far smaller, they're cooler in temperature, and they're much cheaper to produce, and they last a lot longer. We also see RAM first being introduced with magnetic cores, and magnetic disks or hard drives also becoming available. On the software side of things, we see higher level languages like Fortran and COBOL, more natural languages than assembly. By the late 60s, we have the third generation of computers built upon circuit boards. Transistors are being replaced with integrated circuits or chips on a circuit board. They are miniaturized transistors in solid silicon. The size of the integrated circuits and the cost of producing them is decreasing rapidly. The speed and the reliability is increasing. We also see at this time that keyboards and monitors or screens are becoming available. On the software side of things, we see that the first operating systems are becoming available. We're going to study a chapter on operating systems and how they control the workings of a computer. By 1969, the Internet was born. The baby Internet called the ARPANET. It's called the Advanced Research Project Agency. They proposed connecting computers at different research facilities together so they could share research material. There were 4 universities: UCLA, Stanford Research Institute, the University of California at Santa Barbara, and, believe it or not, the University of Utah, was one of the first 4 computers at research facilities that were connected together so they could share information. By 1977, there were 119 computers on ARPANET. By the 70s, we see 4th generation computers, which were built on microprocessors. A company called Intel was creating semiconductors for electronic calculators. And Ted Roth proposed putting more functionality on a single chip, thus creating the Central Processing Unit, or as we know it today, the CPU. The original CPU chip was named the 4004, supposedly for the number of transistors that were placed on it. In the early 70s, the circuits were getting smaller and smaller. Chips in the 60s had about 1,000 circuits. LSI chips contained 15,000 circuits. VLSI chips contained 100,000 to 1,000,000 circuits. All right, so let's talk about Norman Abramson. Norman Abramson invented this idea of wireless networking. It was developed in Hawaii, and the idea was he wanted to be able to communicate or connect multiple machines, but through the islands they could not have physical wires that were connecting them. But we already had a technology that was wirelessly receiving signals called radio waves or radio signals. And so there was a group of researchers at the University of Hawaii that created the first packet-based radio communication network, and they called it AlohaNet. 1973. Now we see the advent of mobile phones. Martin Cooper was a Motorola researcher, and he was a key researcher on the team that developed the first handheld mobile telephone. He created it in New York City in 1983. They assembled a handset that weighed in less than 90 days. They called it the Dynatac 8000. It weighed 2.5 pounds. It was 10 inches long, and it sold for $3,995, and it was dubbed the Brick. The very substantial part of it was the battery. The battery weighed 4 to 5 times more than a modern cell phone does today. It had 20 minutes of talk time, which actually wasn't a problem, mainly because it was too heavy to hold up to your ear for longer than that. All right, 1973, Les Solomon in Popular Electronics. Les Solomon was the editor of a Popular Electronics magazine for electronic enthusiasts, and he published an article in his paper challenging his electronic enthusiast readers to create the first desktop computing kit. And it took a while for him to receive one that he thought he was willing to publish out in his magazine. In January of 1975, he finally found the kit. It was called the Altair 8800, created by Ed Roberts. It cost $397. It had no screen, no keyboard, no card reader, no tape drive, no disk drive, no printer, and no software. And he sold over 4,000 units in the first 3 months. Knowing that all of those components would probably have to be added later, he created it with open architecture so that the hardware could be modified. There were a couple of computer enthusiasts who were aware of Les Solomon's Popular Electronics and what Ed Roberts had created in the Altair 8800. And so we are going to continue our conversation with these two electronic enthusiasts that were influenced by the Altair 8800 when we come back.